us, in us. Now, for those of us that come up under that, now we have a heavy sense of self, rooted in blackness, all the way to God. Our God is the black man, right? So now, if we're building relationship with African continents, or African countries, excuse me, but the country still has a colonized mind, right? Still promoting the colonizers' religious views, educational views. Then, when we turn on the TV and see African nations wearing white wigs, right? You gotta wear a white wig to show that you are official. You still gotta imitate the oppressor, the slave master, the colonizer. It's hard to trust, right? And so that colonized mind produces self-hate. So one of the things that we deal with over here that a lot of Black Americans are dealing with, and it contributes to what you spoke about earlier, Professor Small, about this backlash of Black Americans who are shedding their African identity, right? Part of what's behind that is the feeling that oftentimes our African family that come here with a colonized mind look down on Black people that are here, right? Look down as though the Black Americans are less than, right? And don't respect, what you was talking about earlier, Professor, as far as coming up in this as a victim of the Ma'afa. What you were talking about, Professor Smalls, being an African nation centered in a white-dominated society, and still we rise, and still we fight, and still we produce culture. But oftentimes, Black Americans are not respected, and I think that goes toward a colonized mind. So I think decolonization, dealing with the education, the religious views, and then another thing that I think would help build that is opening the borders. But what I do see that some African nations are doing now, which is offering dual citizenship. If we recognize that Black people in America are African, then we should be offered dual citizenship in every country in Africa. Because guess what? I don't know what country my ancestors came from. We were robbed, so I don't know which one it was. So we should open that up and allow for Black people in America to go back to Africa and have access without, and be treated as citizens and be welcomed back. I think these are practical steps that will go a long way to building that trust. But it starts with decolonization of the mind, because Black people in America, yeah, we were enslaved, we were brought over here, we were robbed, we were kidnapped. But on the mainland and the continent, you were colonized, right? Your leaders were killed. And then they put schools in there, and they began to educate us and give us their values and their mind state, which is the same thing that happened over here. So we're kind of in the same boat. We were kidnapped, we were brought over here, robbed of the knowledge of ourselves, but on the mainland, they took over the land, colonized it, and instituted their system. We got to throw off their mind state, and then we can come together to the table as brothers and sisters.
Thank you so much. Can you give a big hand clap for the presenters? It was such an honor to serve on this panel with you. I won't ask the last two questions because your presentations enabled answers to the last two questions. So I'll pass over the microphone to the Q&A from the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, honorable panelists, for sharing such amazing knowledge with all of us. I have a question. I think all of you have spoken to why, and it is important for our brothers back home and our brothers in the diaspora to find a way to work together. I am an elected person. I am also from Ghana, and I find myself in a lot of spaces where there is a lot of power, but there is also a lot of conflict between African immigrants and our brothers who are African sisters who are African Americans. Specifically, there are two groups in this country. One is African American descendants of slaves, HE.BOBIs. The other one is foundational Black Americans. There are some of us in the field that in the space that I'm talking about that are trying to do exactly what you are talking about. Bring all of us together. What can we do to connect the motherland with those of us who are not just here in the US, but globally? But then we are facing strong opposition from members of HE.BOBIs and members of, how do we call it, FBA, Foundational Black Americans. I have a lot of respect for some of the positions that they are taking. African Americans sacrifice a lot. For me, from Ghana to come here and run for office in one of the most whitest states in the country, Maine, right? And get re-elected over and over, not because there are a lot of African immigrants there, but because when I came to this country, I collected and learned from my African American brothers and sisters. And I just speaking to showing my gratitude for what they did for me to be here, but also pushing back on policies that collectively is harming our people. So I'm going to ask all of you to share what you think we can do to honor the positions that HE.BOBIs and FBA are taking, and also create an opportunity to have an honest and respectable conversation with them. I've tried all the skills that I have, it's not working. Maybe you can help me tonight. Thank you.
I mean, I take a crack at that first, because unfortunately, ADS and Foundation of Black Americans who've been attacking me a lot, but nobody really attacked me. Maybe my children. Decades ago, I began to use the concept of formerly enslaved Africans in America in order to define us in a context where people would respect and recognize that we had a distinct culture, we had a distinct tradition, we have a distinct political reality and a distinct worldview. Because most people see us as just being a blend of a whiteness and not as a distinct. When you come from Jamaica, even though Jamaica, the blacks in America, in Jamaica came from Africa, just like the blacks in America. When you come from Jamaica to America, you're Jamaican. The blacks in the United States of America, no one recognized us as having an identity. Right. Let me say that again, because that's the crux of the problem of it. We have a national identity, we have an ethnic identity, we have a historical identity, and other brothers and sisters from around the world only see us as an addendum to white people. That's not what we are. We have waged a race war deliberately for 500 years. No other group have been engaged in an overt war day by day, losing thousands of people a year, and we still are losing them at the hands of the enemy, and most people don't even see our death. They see the prisons as being full of criminals, not being full of prisoners of war. Okay, and so we have a question, and I don't agree. Here's my disagreement with ADS and with Foundation of Black American is not to understand Pan-Africanism, the attack on Pan-Africanism, the attack on brothers and sisters from the Caribbean and from the continent. I understand their self-defense, but that is evil, that is wrong, and I've attacked that internationally. But for the African American population to want to declare a distinct identity, just like the Ghanaian in a false state called Ghana has a national identity. The Ga within that state has an ethnic identity. We too want to have our national and our ethnic identity recognized. And we haven't done a good job of doing it. And so others don't know how to deal with us, except that we Black Americans, which is just a different color white America. And that's not who we are, you know. I grew up on a plantation in the South. I'm from the Carolinas, where we have our own Creole language, the Gullah Geechee language that's run all along the coast through the Gulf of Mexico into Louisiana, and not a single African community from the Caribbean, Central South America, or the continent will respect that we have a Creole. We're the only African in the diaspora who people will say, you lost everything. All right? Nobody tells the people in Trinidad you lost everything. Nobody tells the people in Haiti you lost everything. Nobody tells the people in Jamaica you lost everything. People, we respect the Jamaican Creole. We respect the Creole, the Haitian people, but no one respects the Creole, the African Americans. We are laughed at by even our own people speaking bad English. We don't know how to know English grammar because we are the only people in North America that speak English using an African grammar structure. And that's why our children can't pass English in America, not because they're crazy. We speak English. Even me now talking to you, I'm not using an English grammar structure. And even I'm not going to change my Creole words and change the African words and verbs. Most of us still, 90% of us speak English. We sound like we speak the same English as white people, but we don't mean the same thing. And that alone has been a problem for us, that we don't quite understand it. The identity of the African American as a distinct African group. We're not just some dark-skinned white people. We are a distinct African group. We have as much of a distinct culture as any African group. We have as much of a distinct history. If I was to line up all of the warriors, male and female, died resisting just in the last 200 years, it will amaze you. It wasn't just Nat Turner and Denmark Vesey and Gabriel Prosser and Harriet Tubman. There was about 100 more. As much as my brother wear Marcus Garvey on his sleeve, Marcus Garvey didn't come here to a vacuum. Marcus Garvey came here because Booker T. Washington, who none of us have mentioned today, and I must mention him, was a great Pan-Africanist. Long before there was a Pan-African conference, he had a conference of the African world at Tuskegee. And people came from Malawi, Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa to that conference before Garvey made his first trip here. Matter of fact, they sent a delegation from Jamaica of 10 people who went back and told Garvey about this conference. And Garvey and Booker T. Washington became good friends. It was Booker T. Washington that invited Garvey to bring his program to America. But Booker was murdered. And you don't even know that. You think he died. Not a single one of you. Just let me see real quick. Where did Booker Washington die? One person. Tell me. Raise your hand. He died on a train after having been poisoned in New York on the way back to Tuskegee, so he could die in his hometown. But he didn't make it to Tuskegee. He died when the train got in Baltimore. They assassinated him because they didn't want him and Garvey to hook up. Garvey would get here months later. And Garvey told, Tony Martin writes about this, where Garvey says, I've come to implement the Tuskegee model. And you got the Tuskegee model as the UNIA. If you can understand, Garvey understood African Americans. That's why he could lead us. He wasn't leading Jamaicans. All those 25,000 people in Madison Square Garden that he brought together, that was my people, because we understood him, because he understood us and respected us as a people. And that's why it grew. And that's the weakness now, that we don't know history. If we know history, we'll understand this contradiction and conflict that we have to work on. But it's the same with us. The African Americans, we don't know you from the continent. They never taught us about Africa. in our books, in our schools. We were taught that even now you can ask the African child, what does an African city looks like? When I taught in the university, I could not get an African to draw me. Listen to me well. This was one of my tests. Draw just the framework so small. That's what you land your plane. And I'm talking from adults, these were not babies. The miseducation is so prolific, but we don't pay attention to it. We don't know you. You don't know us. It is important we learn to study history so we can know ourselves and know one another. And that's at the crux of the problem. The average African American knows nothing about Africa, except that there's some brothers and sisters who speaks with an accent that they met on a job or they met in the school and he was from this or that African country. And if you ask him anything about that brother's country, his language, he doesn't know. Not because he doesn't want to know, somebody made sure he doesn't know. And they've done the same thing with you. I thought to bring a piece of paper that I have in my hotel room that the American government put forth in 1978, I think it was, laying out, and then Brzezinski would do it again when Carter was president. What the American government job was to make sure that the Africans on the continent and the Africans in the United States of America never come together economically, politically, and culture. And that is the international policy of the American foreign policy concerning us. That is still happening today. And if you think they're not influencing ADS, if you think they're not influencing Foundation of Black America, if you think they're not influencing what's happening in South Africa, the Mossad, the British intelligence, then you're crazy. You don't understand that we are at war. They're clear. They need the minerals of Africa in order to survive. They're not willing to pay us our price for it reasonably. And so they decided to use psychological warfare, technical warfare, media warfare at its height. And that this self-hate thing, we thought we had killed self-hate 50 years ago. They have remanufactured self-hate among the African American and among the continental Africans. And when we come together in America, they know we can determine political policy in America because we can determine trade with Africa. They're not going to allow that. It's the policy of the government of the United States not to allow you to have a coalition with the African American. We can beat them if we know that's their intent. But if we think it's just us being confused, then we're confused. You understand? And so I know there's a lot of talking there, but we've got to be clear. This is not a benign neglect thing. Someone is at war with us because they want something we have. What we have is cobalt, coltan, tungsten, manganese, gold, diamond, etc., oil, and they want it because they need it to run their technocratic societies. They're not willing to sit. Do you remember Magufuli? Yes. The president of Tanzania, who went against the British, beat them in the world court, made the British pay billions of dollars of what they stole in gold, took over the processing of gold, built some decent roads, some hospitals, and then all of a sudden he gets, what's that thing, that disease? COVID. And he's gone. Thomas Sankara, everything that you see my young brothers in the Sahel doing, Thomas was talking and doing those things. 2 weeks before he was assassinated, he was at a conference somewhere in West Africa, with ECOWAS, and he was chastising them for coming in there wearing Italian suits and Italian shoes, and he was saying, my shoes is made in Burkina Faso, my suit is made in Burkina Faso, my undies is wearing in Burkina Faso. You know who gave the word for his assassination? Houphouët-Boigny. The French would do nothing in the Francophone state without Houphouët-Boigny of Ivory Coast saying yes. And when Ghana offered to try to get this, I'm able to help him, Ufot wouldn't let them cross his borders. Not that Ufot was not also a victim of colonialism, imperialism, when we talk about that leadership. They're the leadership, but that leadership was trained and programmed by the same imperialists we're fighting against. And so here, between us and America, we gotta override it. That's why the question of Pan-Africanism is essential and important. Pan-Africanism's got to be the word, the way you spell love. Okay? I love you, I don't give a damn what you do to me if you're African, because I know why you do it. We would not exist. There would be no need for the Nation of Islam if there wasn't broken Africans. There would be no need for this conference except that there are broken Africans. Okay? There would be no need for me to devote 60-something years of my life instead of home taking care of my beautiful wife of 36 years and my children who've only seen me half of our marriage, if that much. I could have been at home, but instead, I exist because there's a troubled mind that is my brother and sister, and that is my children. And so we got to be clear about certain things in the Mount End. We've got to be clear about the fact that we are Africans, light-skinned, brown-skinned, short, tall, Malawian, South Carolinian, Brazilian. We are just one African. And when I see you, I see me and nothing else. And to get to that point, we're going to go back to our ancestors, back to our culture, back to our poorer society. We didn't have rites of passage, secret societies for nothing. We were socializing the minds of the next generation to lead. But we've abandoned them now. We don't know of the secret societies anymore. And we don't even understand the few that we have. I'm a Freemason, if you can call them free. None of us are free. I'm in Prince Hall. I love it. I enjoy Prince Hall. The attempt was to restore African integrity. I was telling somebody today, when you're in the Blue Lodge, and no one can speak again. I can speak anything I want from the Lodge. When you're in the Blue Lodge, you got on your nice little suits. And you look like a nice European American. But when you hit the Red Lodge, you get a dashiki and a kufi. You don't wear them outside, so nobody knows. The whole thing is to take you back to African values, African principles, African interests. The whole history is about African people, but they keep that as the secret. And unless you subordinate yourself to them, they won't tell you that you are the model for which the best of them are trying to copy themselves. So understand the confusion, and let's love each other in spite of the contradiction. Then we can solve the problem. Because I'm going to love you whether you appreciate it or not, because I understand why you don't appreciate it. I'm going to protect myself from your destruction, but I'm going to love you anyway. And the brother, he was talking about the music industry. I have children who've been vice presidents of Sony. I have children who've been CEO of Amazon World Distribution, and I was well vetted. I talked to Tupac 2 days before he called, 2 days before he died. And what that boy got killed for is trying to take over distribution of rap music. Not for no rift between him and Biggie, because him and Biggie was in it together. And Biggie was killed for the same reason. And a few other rappers was killed also, my brothers down in Jersey, and who was a part of that. Teddy Riley had to give up Black Street. Y'all remember Black Street? No diggity? Okay. Well, you know why Black Street died? Because those old white Jews said, either you do rap music or we will not distribute one tape of yours. And so Teddy called a meeting of everybody, and I was at that meeting. And he told them we're going to take 1 year and we disband. Because they're not going to make us slaves. And so Black Street got destroyed because the same old people you were talking about. Tell them they would never distribute one of the things. Michael, who was working with Teddy at that time, most of Michael's last album was written by Teddy when he went against those devils he was talking about. They assassinated that boy. His brother took him away to the Arab world, to the Muslim world, protected him for a couple of years. But Michael wouldn't give up. He came back. He figured he had the power to use his voice, to use the culture, to go against the system. And they didn't give him but a few months. we are in a war, and the war is for control of our minds. Because when we get the mind straight, Africa is free.
Have so much useful to add. However, I'll say one or two things. When you talked about the fact that it is not a mistake, it is deliberate that we are divided.
President, meet with the very people who saying they were going to kill the other brothers and sisters by $7 a month. And they have been meeting with the president of the nation. Why don't you like them in mind?
Absolutely, Professor. So now that we know that it's deliberate, I mean, black people are scattered all over the world. And the biggest threat to those that seek, one must get a permission from America, a black man must get permission from America.